You feel your reactions are natural, yet something quietly scripts them for you. Someone can shape your responses without orders, without threats, without obvious control. If you want your mind back from silent pressure, listen very carefully today. Every reaction you show feels like your choice, yet it rarely starts from you. It starts from a trigger that was installed long before you even noticed. The real trap is not the trigger itself, but your automatic obedience. Unnoticed psychological traps are not dramatic. They are boringly repetitive and strangely familiar. They hide in repeated phrases, familiar tones, and known emotional patterns around you. Your nervous system learns them like shortcuts, because shortcuts feel safe and energy-saving. A manipulative mind understands this basic rule of human behavior very deeply. It knows you cannot question every small signal around you. Your brain would collapse. So it does something smarter. It teaches your brain what to ignore. When your brain learns what to ignore, that ignorance becomes the first trap. You stop noticing certain tones, certain words, certain facial reactions, certain emotional shifts. Your attention moves away, but your reactions remain connected with those same invisible signals. Slowly, a link forms between a subtle cue and your repeated reaction. Maybe a slight pause, maybe a disappointed sigh, maybe only a short silence. Each time you react to that cue, the link grows stronger inside you. Machiavelli once said, if you control expectations, you quietly control behavior. Expectations are built through repetition, prediction, and subtle emotional rewards or punishments. When you learn what reaction keeps peace, you start performing it automatically. The trap does not say you must react this way to survive. It whispers something softer. You already know what keeps things calm, do that. Inside you, comfort merges with obedience, and you call it your personality. Another layer forms through emotional labels, which are silently attached to certain reactions. You may feel selfish for saying no, guilty for resting, weak for stepping back. These labels are not neutral. They were taught by someone protecting their own comfort. Albert Bandura once said, if people repeat actions, the environment is teaching. When you keep apologizing for tiny things, your environment is training that pattern. When you always fix tension, your environment is training your emotional responsibility. Manipulative minds understand that direct control creates rebellion, so they prefer shaping environments instead. They surround you with reactions that reward compliance and punish quiet resistance. They do not need threats. Your fear of emotional discomfort becomes enough. Slow draining begins when your reactions always move toward calming others before calming yourself. You may feel uneasy when someone is displeased, even for a short moment. Your nervous system rushes to remove that discomfort, even if nothing serious is happening. Over time, you stop asking an important question inside your mind. Do I actually agree with what I am doing right now? Instead, you only ask, how can I quickly remove this emotional tension? That mental switch is a powerful psychological trap hiding in daily reactions. You replace inner alignment with outer harmony and call it kindness or maturity. In reality, you are becoming easier to handle, easier to drain energy from. Another unnoticed trap is selective feedback, where only certain reactions get acknowledged. When you sacrifice yourself, you receive praise, warmth, or at least absence of conflict. When you set a boundary, responses become cold, distant, or confusingly disappointed. Your brain starts forming a very clear but unspoken rule about reactions. Reactions that protect you bring tension. Reactions that exhaust you bring peace. Under that rule, you willingly choose the reaction that secretly harms you. This is how manipulators control without instructions. They simply reward the reactions they prefer. They do not need to say, you must always be available or agreeable. They only need to show discomfort when you are not, and relief when you are. Another subtle trap appears through repetition of specific emotional stories about you. You might keep hearing that you are strong because you never complain. You might hear that you are wise because you never react impulsively. These labels feel positive, yet they quietly lock your behavior into narrow lanes. You start guarding that image, even when it exhausts your body and mind. You fear breaking the script, because breaking it may change how others see you. Slow emotional draining happens when you maintain these labels at the cost of yourself. You keep proving you are patient, calm, understanding, helpful, endlessly available. Each time you prove it, the role deepens and the reaction becomes automatic. The most dangerous trap is when you begin monitoring yourself more than others. You start watching whether you are kind enough, calm enough, understanding enough. You stop observing whether the other side is fair, respectful, or emotionally responsible. When your attention fully turns inward, the manipulative system becomes almost self-sustaining. You correct your tone, your words, your expressions before anyone even reacts. You become your own supervisor, enforcing standards that were never truly yours. You never noticed when this supervision started because it grew from tiny adjustments. A soft suggestion here, a slight emotional withdrawal there, a subtle compliment somewhere else. Each event alone looked harmless. Together they formed the framework of your reactions. Now your nervous system predicts emotional consequences faster than your conscious mind thinks. You react before you reflect and call it instinct or natural personality. But deep inside, something feels off, as if your choices are slightly borrowed. There is another layer still hiding under all these patterns of control. A layer where your silence, your delayed answer, your confusion are also manipulated. Do you really think your quiet moments are free from these invisible traps? You think you notice every signal around you, yet most signals bypass your awareness. Your reactions feel voluntary, but they often start before you consciously decide anything. If you want to reclaim that hidden split second of choice, stay sharply aware right now. The human mind reacts faster to emotional patterns than conscious reasoning. Your nervous system works like an old predictive machine, always preparing a response in advance. Manipulative minds use this biological habit as their quiet advantage. They understand that you do not question what feels familiar. You only question what feels sudden or unusual, which is why subtlety becomes their tool. The more repetitive a cue becomes, the deeper it sinks into your automatic reactions. This is how unnoticed psychological traps evolve from tiny emotional repetitions. Your attention stops registering the pattern, but your body keeps responding to it. A small sigh, a delayed answer, a cold tone, all become emotional instructions. These instructions form a chain of conditioned responses inside you. The chain does not feel forced. It feels natural because it hides behind comfort. Your brain chooses the easy reaction because the easy reaction reduces friction. Machiavelli once said, if an influence appears gentle, people rarely defend against it. Gentle influence hides in predictable reactions, not in dramatic pressure. Predictable pressure teaches your behavior how to move without resistance. The most common trap appears through emotional mirroring. When someone repeatedly reacts strongly to your independence, you reduce your independence. When someone reacts warmly to your compliance, you increase your compliance. This exchange becomes invisible because it feels like maintaining peace. You shift your reactions according to emotional climate, not according to your own values. Soon you stop asking what you want and only ask what keeps harmony. But harmony becomes a psychological cage when it is used as emotional currency. You start trading your needs for temporary calmness. You start trading your boundaries for temporary approval. Over time, you avoid reactions that create even the smallest discomfort in others. Your brain marks those reactions as risky and unnecessary. You choose the path that avoids tension rather than the path that protects you. A deeper layer forms through cognitive fatigue. You cannot analyze every signal, so your mind builds shortcuts for survival. These shortcuts quickly become habits, and habits become identity. Albert Bandura once said, if an action is repeated effortlessly, the environment is reinforcing it. Effortless reactions are usually trained reactions, not independent choices. Your environment becomes the teacher of your unconscious behavior. Another trap appears when manipulative minds repeat specific emotional narratives. You may hear that you are peaceful because you stay quiet. You may hear that you are wise because you avoid conflict. These narratives seem positive, yet they anchor your reactions to a fixed identity. You begin defending that identity, even when it drains you internally. You choose silence because being expressive no longer fits the image others created. Then comes the trap of selective discomfort. People around you may subtly withdraw warmth when you express firmness. They may become silent, cold, or emotionally distant when you assert a boundary. Your body registers this emotional shift faster than your mind. You feel something is off, and your instinct pushes you to restore balance. You adjust your reaction again, just to remove that brief discomfort. Slowly, you stop noticing that this pattern is deliberate. You think you are keeping peace, but you are actually maintaining someone else's comfort. Your reactions become shaped by avoidance, not by awareness. One of the most powerful traps is when your emotional sensitivity becomes your vulnerability. You detect emotional shifts quickly, but instead of using the skill, you overcorrect yourself. This overcorrection becomes a gateway for deeper manipulation. You start predicting emotional reactions before they happen. You adjust your tone, your decisions, your timing, even your pauses. You become predictable, and predictability is the perfect environment for influence. The manipulative system now operates with minimal effort. It uses your own emotional intelligence against you. You police yourself because you want stability, even at your own cost. But there is another hidden mechanism that deepens these psychological traps. A mechanism you rarely notice because it happens inside your self-talk. How many of your thoughts are truly independent, and how many are trained reactions? You believe your thoughts are formed by logic, yet many thoughts are shaped by conditioning. You assume your inner voice is yours, but much of it was quietly installed by repetition. If you want to hear your real voice again, you must question the training behind it. Your thinking patterns are not isolated. They mirror the emotional environment you adapt to. Your mind learns which thoughts create tension and which thoughts create calmness. Then it begins choosing only the thoughts that avoid tension, even if they weaken you. This is how unnoticed psychological traps shift from external pressure to internal programming. You no longer need someone's reaction to control you. Your mind produces the reaction itself. It becomes a self-regulating loop that operates without conscious permission. The most hidden trap is reactive thinking, where your brain responds before you reflect. You think you are making a decision, but your body already committed to a response. Your conscious mind arrives late and simply justifies what the system already chose. Machiavelli once said, if you teach people how to think, you no longer need to command them. This truth explains why subtle manipulation focuses on thinking patterns, not dramatic orders. If your thoughts follow a predictable path, your reactions follow the same predictable path. A common pattern appears in the form of silent self-blame. When something feels uncomfortable, you immediately question your tone or behavior. You assume you caused the discomfort even without evidence. This habit forms when you learn that emotional tension is dangerous. You begin scanning yourself instead of assessing the situation neutrally. You treat inner discomfort as failure rather than a natural signal. Over time, you attach negative meanings to your own boundaries. You may think setting limits makes you difficult or unkind. You may think saying no creates conflict or ruins peace. These thoughts are not yours. They are reflections of repeated emotional conditioning. Your mind learned that protecting yourself brings unpleasant reactions from others. So it rewired your thinking to avoid anything that smells like resistance. Another unnoticed trap emerges through internalized emotional scripts. These scripts replay inside your mind automatically, guiding your decisions. They tell you to stay calm, stay agreeable, stay understanding, stay available. You follow these scripts because breaking them feels dangerous. Not physically dangerous, but emotionally uncertain and socially risky. Your brain avoids uncertainty more than it avoids discomfort. Albert Bandura once said, if a belief is reinforced long enough, it becomes identity. Your repeated reactions create beliefs, and your beliefs create your internal script. Soon, you stop seeing the script as conditioning and start seeing it as personality. The deepest layer forms when you start editing yourself in real time. You observe your tone before speaking, your expression before reacting. You monitor your presence as if someone invisible is constantly evaluating you. This internal monitoring is not awareness, it is psychological compliance. Awareness expands your choices, compliance narrows them. You begin choosing the reaction that feels safest instead of the reaction that feels true. The more you monitor yourself, the less spontaneous your thinking becomes. Spontaneous thoughts are replaced by calculated thoughts designed to avoid tension. These calculations create mental exhaustion, but you call it emotional maturity. Another trap emerges through anticipatory fear, the fear of emotional consequences. You worry how someone might react even before anything has happened. Your thoughts bend themselves to prevent imagined disapproval. This anticipatory fear shapes your decisions more strongly than any external pressure. You avoid small risks that might upset someone, even if the risks protect your well-being. You choose silence, you choose delay, you choose softness, even when firmness is needed. This mental loop repeats so often that you stop noticing it. The trap becomes part of your default thinking, hidden under your desire for stability. You think you are choosing peace, but you are choosing predictability for others. The question now is simple, yet unsettling. If your thoughts have been shaped by invisible training for so long, how many of your current beliefs are truly yours, and how many are borrowed? You assume your emotional responses come from your nature, yet most come from silent conditioning. You think you feel things freely, but your emotions follow patterns someone quietly reinforced. If you want emotional independence, you must understand how those patterns were built. Your emotional system learns faster than your conscious mind. It adapts to what brings relief and avoids what brings discomfort. Manipulative minds rely on this built-in survival mechanism more than anything else. They know you move toward emotional warmth even if it drains you. They know you avoid emotional coldness even if it protects you. So they structure their signals around these two forces, reward and withdrawal. This creates one of the most dangerous unnoticed traps, emotional anchoring. An anchor forms when a specific emotional state becomes linked with a specific reaction. You then repeat that reaction automatically whenever the emotional state appears. For example, if a disappointed tone repeatedly follows your refusal, your mind starts linking refusal with emotional danger. Your body reacts before your logic, pulling you toward compliance. Machiavelli once said, if you control fear and comfort, you control decision-making. Fear and comfort do not need to be extreme, they only need to be predictable. Predictability creates habits, and habits create obedience without awareness. Another trap forms through emotional debt, a subtle feeling that you owe calmness to others. You feel responsible for restoring peace, even when you are not the cause of disturbance. You feel uneasy until everyone else feels fine, and that unease controls you. Emotional debt is reinforced by selective appreciation. You receive warmth only when you hold everything together. You receive distance or silence when you express your own needs. Your emotional system learns this pattern faster than your conscious mind. Warmth feels like safety, distance feels like danger, and you adjust accordingly. Your reactions become shaped by the need to avoid emotional distance. Another unnoticed trap appears through expectation conditioning. People around you may subtly expect you to stay calm, patient, and endlessly understanding. These expectations are not spoken, they are reinforced through reactions. When you stay calm under pressure, you may hear admiration. When you finally express yourself, you may face confusion or disappointment. Your emotions register these shifts as invisible rules. Soon, you fear emotional misalignment more than you fear exhaustion. Your emotional energy becomes shaped around others, stability, not your own. You attach your inner balance to their approval. Albert Bandura once said, if emotional outcomes are predictable, actions become automatic. Your automatic emotional responses form exactly from this predictability. You move in the direction that removes emotional friction fastest. Another deep trap forms when you start suppressing emotions to stay acceptable. You swallow discomfort, bury frustration, hide confusion, mute disappointment. You do this because you learned that open emotions create problems. Your emotional expression shrinks into a narrow range. You appear calm, peaceful, and mature, yet inside you feel heavy and constricted. This suppressed state makes you more predictable and easier to influence. Emotional suppression also creates internal guilt. You feel guilty for reacting, guilty for expressing, guilty for needing space. The guilt itself becomes a tool of silent control. Then comes the trap of emotional looping. A looping pattern is when you recheck your actions repeatedly for emotional correctness. You ask yourself if you sounded rude, if you reacted too strongly, if you upset someone. You repeat this inner loop until you reshape your entire emotional presence. You dim your reactions before others even speak. You adjust your emotions based on imagined consequences. These loops quietly train your identity to fit a controlled emotional script. You behave like someone who must stay stable at all times. You forget that emotional variety is natural, healthy, and human. This emotional predictability becomes a playground for influence. Your reactions can be guided with minimal effort because they follow familiar routes. Anyone who understands your emotional triggers can shape your state without speaking. But the real question hides under all these emotional traps. If your emotional patterns have been shaped by invisible hands for so long, what happens when someone uses your own silence as the next tool of manipulation? You think silence is your protection, yet silence is often the easiest doorway for influence. You believe staying quiet keeps you safe, but quietness can be shaped into obedience. If you want to understand the real power of silence, you must study how it gets weaponized. Silence feels neutral, but the mind fills silence with meaning. You interpret pauses, gaps, delays, and emotional stillness faster than spoken words. Manipulative minds rely on this natural tendency to create psychological pressure. This is how silence becomes an unnoticed trap, a space designed to provoke self-correction. When someone withdraws warmth, you feel responsible for fixing the atmosphere. When someone becomes quiet after your decision, you feel guilty even before explanation. These silent cues work because your brain hates uncertainty more than discomfort. Uncertainty activates internal tension, and you rush to resolve it by changing your reaction. Your silence becomes controlled by their silence without a single instruction. Machiavelli once said, if you allow people to question themselves, they control themselves. Controlled silence forces self-doubt, and self-doubt forces compliance. You adjust your behavior not because someone demanded it, but because silence trained it. Another unnoticed trap emerges through silent expectations. You sense what people want even when they do not speak. You feel pressure to deliver the reaction that keeps emotional harmony. You begin predicting outcomes before they happen. You anticipate disappointment, anger, withdrawal, or confusion. Your mind rushes to avoid these possibilities by shrinking your choices. This anticipation is not intuition, it is conditioning. Conditioning teaches you that silence carries consequences, so you stay within the limits that silence indirectly creates. A deeper trap appears through silence after assertiveness. When you express a boundary and receive a cold pause, your body reacts instantly. Your chest tightens, your thoughts scramble, your instinct urges you to soften your stance. This reaction feels personal, but it is trained. You learn that your boundaries interrupt emotional comfort, so you avoid them. You trade your truth for temporary peace again and again. Albert Bandura once said, if behavior changes without external force, internal conditioning is active. Internal conditioning works strongest when silence replaces confrontation. You alter your reactions quietly, believing it is your mature choice. Another trap forms when you start filling silence with explanations. You over-explain to avoid being misunderstood. You justify yourself to remove imagined tension. You soften your tone just to prevent emotional discomfort. These habits reinforce a script of emotional responsibility. You feel obligated to keep the atmosphere smooth. Your silence becomes less about reflection and more about self-protection. Then comes the trap of delayed responses. If someone reacts slowly to your message or decision, you instantly assume something is wrong. Your mind creates emotional stories faster than logic can intervene. You may blame yourself, question your words, or regret your honesty. These reactions happen because your system links delay with danger. The link was built through repeated experiences you never consciously examined. When silence becomes a psychological signal, you start moving according to it. You choose gentler words, safer choices, quieter boundaries. You adjust your emotional frequency to avoid invisible consequences. This makes your entire presence predictable. Predictability is the most valuable element for manipulation. When your silence follows their silence, control becomes effortless. But there is a deeper and more complex trap waiting beneath all these silent patterns. A trap that is rarely noticed because it hides in approval, kindness, and emotional warmth. Are you ready to see how positive reinforcement becomes the strongest psychological chain of all? You trust positive reactions more than anything, yet positive reactions can become invisible chains. You think warmth is always genuine, but warmth can be used as reinforcement. If you truly want freedom, you must understand how approval becomes the strongest form of control. Your mind responds to praise faster than it responds to logic. Approval feels safe, comforting, rewarding, and emotionally stabilizing. Manipulative systems quietly turn this natural desire into a psychological leash. The trap begins the moment you start chasing positive responses instead of inner alignment. You choose actions that guarantee approval. You avoid actions that risk emotional withdrawal. This shift feels harmless, yet it rewires your decision-making. You stop acting from personal clarity and start acting from expected reward. You behave in ways that maintain the emotional climate others prefer. Machiavelli once said, if you reward specific behavior consistently, people bind themselves. Reward does not need to be large, it only needs to be predictable. Predictable reward turns autonomy into performance. A subtle trap forms through selective appreciation. You receive warmth when you sacrifice your needs. You receive praise when you overextend yourself. You receive extra kindness when you stay silent and accommodating. These patterns feel supportive, but they reinforce emotional obedience. Your brain remembers which behaviors bring comfort and repeats them. Slowly, your identity becomes tied to being agreeable and self-sacrificing. Positive reinforcement creates a stronger bond than punishment. Punishment pushes people away, but reward pulls them forward willingly. This is why emotional warmth becomes the sharpest silent weapon. Another unnoticed trap forms when you protect your good image to others. You feel pressure to stay understanding, calm, patient, and always in control. You fear disappointing others because disappointment threatens your emotional safety. Your reactions become chained to the image others built for you. You maintain that image even when it exhausts you internally. You stop expressing anything that might look imperfect or inconvenient. Albert Bandura once said, if approval shapes identity, identity becomes a prison. Your need to be seen as good becomes a barrier to truth. Your desire to maintain peace becomes a barrier to honesty. Then comes the deepest trap, internalized compliance. You no longer need external pressure. You regulate yourself according to invisible emotional rules. You calm yourself, silence yourself, reshape yourself. You avoid boundaries, avoid directness, avoid emotional honesty. You choose reactions that serve others more than they serve your own well-being. The manipulative system becomes self-sustaining. It does not need active influence, your own patterns maintain it. You have been trained to predict emotional outcomes and react accordingly. When this internal mechanism becomes stable, something unsettling happens. Your mind stops questioning the system because the system feels normal. You mistake conditioning for personality and obedience for balance. But here lies the final twist of unnoticed psychological traps. The human mind can be shaped, but it can also be reshaped. Conditioning can be learned, but it can also be unlearned. Your reactions can be reclaimed if you challenge the silent rules behind them. Your thoughts can be reclaimed if you question the identities you were pushed to maintain. Your emotions can be reclaimed if you detach comfort from compliance. The real question is not whether manipulation shaped your reactions. The real question is something far more powerful. Now that you have seen how deeply these traps operate inside you, are you willing to explore who you are without the influence that shaped you for so long?